Guilty on all counts, the judge thundered. Marissa Caldwell, a black woman of 60, gripped the courtroom's cold wooden rail in Atlanta, her hands trembling as the life sentence sank in. Murder and fraud, pinned on lies. Forged fingerprints, phantom money, false witnesses, deceptions that crushed her like ice. The prosecutor's sharp eyes gleamed with cruel triumph, while a neighbor's sob echoed, "Marissa wouldn't hurt a soul." Yet the jury saw only a poor black woman, easy to condemn. As cuffs snapped on, Marissa's mind fled to a rainy night long ago, opening her door to two white children, Leon and Talia, shivering and scared, fleeing a monster. Was her kindness worth this price? Deep in her heart, their voices whispered, "Mama Riss, we'll come back." Will two lost children defy a system's lies? Can love outlast decades of betrayal? Who wove this web to trap Marissa? The gavel's echo faded, but the weight of the judge's words clung to Marissa Caldwell like damp Atlanta air. Her fingers, calloused from years of scrubbing floors and soothing frightened children, dug into the courtroom's oak rail, as if it could anchor her against the storm raging inside. The prosecutor, a wiry man with eyes like polished flint, snapped his briefcase shut, his lips curling in a victory that tasted of venom. Across the room, Mrs. Jenkins, the neighbor who'd brought Marissa collard greens every Sunday, choked on a sob, her voice a fragile thread in the chaos. "She's no killer. Marissa wouldn't harm a fly." But the jury, 12 strangers with faces carved from indifference, had seen a black woman from Atlanta's rough edges and woven a monster from lies. Marissa's chest tightened, each breath a battle against the cold steel of handcuffs snapping around her wrists. The bailiff, a young man with uneasy eyes, guided her toward the side door, his grip softer than the verdict demanded. "Ma'am, I need you to move," he murmured, almost an apology. She nodded, her gaze drifting to the courtroom's high windows, where sunlight fought through grime to cast fractured beams on the floor. Once, she'd watched that same light dance across her tiny porch, where two white children, Leon and Talia, had sat eating her biscuits, their laughter a melody against the city's hum. Now that memory felt like a blade, cutting deeper with every step toward the holding cell. The prosecutor's voice slithered through her thoughts, replaying his closing argument. Marissa Caldwell, a woman of questionable means, orchestrated a murder to silence her past. The evidence is undeniable. Fingerprints, bank records, witnesses. Lies, all of them, spun with the precision of a spider's web. She'd never touched a weapon, never seen the money they claimed filled her account. The witnesses, strangers with coached tongues, paid to paint her as a criminal. Yet the jury had swallowed it whole, their eyes skimming her worn dress, her skin, her poverty, and finding guilt in the spaces society left for women like her. As the bailiff led her down a dim corridor, Marissa's mind churned, grasping for the thread of truth buried beneath the deception. Someone had orchestrated this, someone with power, with malice, with a grudge that spanned decades. Vincent Hargrove's name pulsed in her thoughts, a shadow from a night when rain had pounded her roof like fists. She could still see his silhouette in her doorway, his tailored suit mocking her threadbare home, his voice smooth as poison. "Those kids belong to me." She'd defied him then, choosing love over his money, choosing Leon and Talia over safety. Had that choice led her here, to this cage of concrete and lies? The holding cell's door clanged shut, and Marissa sank onto the bench, her knees weak as if the earth itself had betrayed her. The air smelled of bleach and despair, the walls etched with the scratches of those who'd come before. She closed her eyes and the past surged forward, vivid as a wound. Leon, 12 years old, his dark eyes fierce despite the bruises, shielding his younger sister Talia, whose small hands clutched his torn jacket. They'd been running from Vincent, a man who saw children as pawns in his empire of greed. Marissa had opened her door, her heart, her life to them, despite the whispers of neighbors. A black woman raising white kids? That's trouble waiting to happen. She'd ignored them, teaching Leon and Talia that love didn't see color, only need. But Vincent's shadow had never left. His threats had lingered, a low hum beneath their fragile happiness. Marissa remembered the night he'd sent a thug to her doorstep, a hulking figure with a scar slicing his cheek, warning her to give up the kids or lose everything. She'd stood firm, her voice steady. You tell Vincent they're my family now. That defiance had cost her, first with whispers of fraud, then with this courtroom crucifixion. Someone had taken Vincent's vendetta and sharpened it, weaving a tapestry of lies that bound her to a murder she didn't commit. Was Vincent still pulling strings from the grave, or had someone new inherited his hatred? A guard's boots scuffed outside, breaking her reverie. "Caldwell, your lawyer's here," he barked. Marissa stood, her spine straightening despite the weight of defeat. Her public defender, Ms. Lila Thornton, slipped into the cell, her face a map of exhaustion and resolve. "Marissa, this isn't over," Lila said, her voice low but fierce. "The evidence is too perfect, too clean. Someone set you up, and I'm digging into it." Marissa met her gaze, a flicker of hope sparking in her chest. "Lila, they're trying to bury me for what I did for those kids. Leon and Talia, they're out there somewhere. They promised they'd come back." Lila's eyes softened, but worry creased her brow. "If they're alive, Marissa, they're in danger too. Whoever framed you knows they're the key to unraveling this." Marissa's heart clenched, imagining Leon's sharp mind and Talia's fierce spirit caught in the same web that trapped her. "Find them, Lila," she whispered, her voice breaking like glass. "They're my family, and they're the only ones who can prove I'm innocent." As Lila left, Marissa leaned against the wall, her breath shallow. The cell's cold seeped into her bones, but deep within, a fire burned. The memory of two children calling her Mama Riss, their voices a promise that refused to die. Somewhere beyond these walls, Leon and Talia were fighting, their lives shaped by the love she'd given them. Would they find the truth before it was too late? Or would the lies that chained her swallow them too? The answer lay in a past she couldn't escape, in a future she could only pray for. The rain battered Marissa Caldwell's small Atlanta home like a fist, each drop a plea against the sagging roof. Inside, the dim glow of a single bulb flickered, casting shadows across her worn couch as she stirred a pot of soup, the aroma of onions and thyme a faint shield against the night's chill. Her heart, heavy with the ache of a life spent giving more than she had, jolted at the frantic pounding on her door. Who would brave this storm? Her hands, rough from years of cleaning others' homes, tightened around the ladle, a pulse of fear threading through her veins. She was a black woman alone in a neighborhood where trust was as scarce as hope, and strangers at midnight rarely brought good news. Marissa peered through the peephole, her breath catching. Two children stood on her porch, soaked to the bone, their pale faces ghostly under the rain's relentless assault. The boy, maybe 12, had a bruise blooming across his cheek, his dark eyes fierce yet trembling with a fear that clawed at Marissa's heart. The girl, younger, clung to his arm, her blonde hair plastered to her face, her small body shivering so violently it seemed she might shatter. They were white, an anomaly in this corner of Atlanta, and their presence stirred a whisper of judgment from neighbors she could already hear. A black woman taking in white kids. Trouble's brewing. "Open the door, Marissa," she muttered to herself, her voice a low anchor against the storm of doubt. She swung it wide, the wind's howl rushing in with the children. "Lord have mercy," she gasped, taking in their torn clothes, the boy's protective stance, the girl's eyes wide as a frightened deer's. "What happened to you, babies?" Her voice, warm as the soup simmering behind her, wrapped around them, a lifeline in the dark. The boy stepped forward, shielding the girl. "I'm Leon," he said, his voice steady despite the quiver in his jaw. "This is Talia. We got nowhere else to go." His words carried a weight no child should bear, and Marissa's chest tightened, memories of her own childhood, hungry nights, a mother's tired hands, flooding back. "Where's your family?" she asked, kneeling to meet their eyes. Talia's voice, small but sharp, broke through. "Dead, burned in a fire. And Vincent, he's supposed to care for us, but he—" She choked, tears mingling with rain. Leon's fist clenched. "Vincent Hargrove, he's our guardian. He makes us do things, bad things. We ran tonight." Marissa's blood turned cold, her heart a drumbeat of rage and sorrow. She knew men like Vincent, men who saw children as tools, not souls. What kind of things? She pressed, her voice soft but unyielding. Leon's eyes dropped, shame and defiance warring within. Carrying packages, dark alleys. He says if we don't, he'll hurt Talia worse. Talia's hand tightened on Leon's, her whisper barely audible. I don't want to disappear. Marissa's throat burned, a fire of protectiveness flaring within. She'd seen too many kids like these, broken, discarded, slip through the cracks of a city that didn't care. But these two, with their pale skin and desperate eyes, stirred something deeper, a challenge to the world's rules. A colleague's voice echoed in her mind. You sure you can handle white kids? Folks'll talk. Let them talk, she thought, her resolve hardening like stone. You're safe here, she said, her words a vow. Nobody's touching you under my roof. She led them to the kitchen, wrapping them in blankets that smelled of lavender and thyme. As they sipped hot soup, their shoulders eased, but fear lingered in their glances. Talia's voice trembled. Will you call the police? Marissa paused, the weight of that question heavy as the rain outside. She knew the system, how it chewed up kids like Leon and Talia, how it doubted women like her. Do you want me to? She asked. Leon shook his head fiercely. They won't believe us. Vincent's got people, important people. Before Marissa could respond, a shadow loomed at her door. The knock was deliberate, heavy, like a warning carved in sound. She opened it to find Vincent Hargrove, his tailored suit untouched by the rain, his pale eyes slicing through her like a blade. Mrs. Caldwell, he said, his voice smooth as venom, you have my property. Marissa's heart pounded, but she stood tall, a shield between him and her kids. They're not property, she snapped, her voice a spark in the dark. They're children. Vincent's smile was a predator's, cold and calculated. He held out a check, the numbers dizzying against the paper. Take this, and we forget this happened. Marissa's fingers itched, not for the money, but for the audacity of this man who thought love could be bought. She tore the check in half, the sound sharp as a gunshot. Get out of my house, she said, her voice low but blazing. Vincent's eyes narrowed, a promise of retribution. You'll regret choosing heart over sense, Mrs. Caldwell. As he vanished into the storm, Marissa turned to Leon and Talia, their eyes wide with awe and fear. You didn't take his money, Leon whispered, his voice breaking. Marissa knelt, pulling them close, their damp heads against her heart. No money in the world's worth more than you, she said, her voice a fortress. But as the rain roared on, a chill settled in her bones. Vincent's promise wasn't empty. Trouble was coming, and Marissa knew she'd fight to her last breath to keep these children safe. The rain had long faded, but its echo lingered in Marissa Caldwell's small Atlanta home, a rhythm of defiance that pulsed through her days. The cramped kitchen, once a solitary refuge, now hummed with life. Leon's quiet scribbling at the table, Talia's soft humming as she swept the floor, their presence a melody Marissa hadn't known she needed. Her heart, once heavy with the weight of a world that judged her skin before her soul, swelled with a love that defied whispers from the neighborhood. A black woman raising white kids? The grocer had muttered, his eyes narrowing. Marissa had smiled, her voice steady. They're my kids, period. Each day she poured herself into Leon and Talia, stitching their broken spirits with care, knowing Vincent Hargrove's shadow still lurked beyond her walls. Leon, now taller, his bruises faded, but his eyes still sharp with caution, filled notebooks with stories of justice, tales of heroes exposing liars. His fingers, smudged with ink, trembled when he read them aloud, as if afraid his dreams might shatter. Mama Riss, he said one evening, his voice low, I'm going to be a reporter someday. Make the world see the truth. Marissa's chest ached with pride, but fear gnawed at her. She saw the boy who'd stood protectively over his sister that rainy night, his courage a flame that could draw Vincent's wrath. You'll shine, Leon, she said, ruffling his hair, her smile hiding the dread that coiled in her gut. Talia, with her fierce heart, found solace in helping others. She'd taken to slipping Marissa's extra biscuits to a neighbor's boy, his hungry eyes mirroring her own past. He's like me, Mama Riss, she whispered, her voice thick with memory. Nobody cared about us till you. Marissa's throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. She remembered Talia's trembling hands clutching Leon's jacket, her fear of disappearing. Now at 15, Talia's strength was a quiet fire, but Marissa felt the weight of her choice to defy Vincent. Every laugh from her children was a victory, yet each carried the risk of his promised retribution. "You're my heart baby," Marissa said, pulling Talia close, her embrace a shield against a world that didn't understand their family. The neighborhood's whispers grew sharper, like thorns underfoot. At the community center, a caseworker, Ms. Ellis, cornered Marissa, her voice dripping with doubt. "You're doing good, Marissa, but raising white kids? Folks think you're stirring trouble." Marissa's jaw clenched, her heart pounding like a drum. "Trouble's what happens when you turn your back on kids who need you," she shot back, her eyes blazing. She'd faced those looks her whole life, judgments that saw her skin before her deeds. But for Leon and Talia, she'd walk through fire. Still, the weight of those stares pressed harder, a reminder that their family built on love was a defiance of the world's rules. One humid afternoon, Leon burst through the door, his face pale, clutching an old leather notebook. "I found this in my stuff from Vincent's place," he said, voice shaking. "It's got names, places, bad stuff he's doing." Marissa's blood ran cold as she flipped through the pages, her fingers tracing lists of shipments, coded deals and payoffs. Vincent's empire of greed laid bare. Her heart raced, a mix of hope and terror. This could end him, but it could also destroy them. "We have to hide this," she said, her voice low, locking the notebook in a tin box under her bed. "Nobody can know Leon. Not yet." His eyes, fierce with a boy's need for justice, met hers. "I want to fight him, Mama Riss," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm not scared." But Marissa was. That night, a phone call shattered the quiet. Vincent's voice, smooth as venom, slithered through the receiver. "You think you've won, Mrs. Caldwell? You're playing a dangerous game." Her heart thudded, her grip tightening until her knuckles ached. "You don't scare me, Vincent," she lied, her voice a steel thread. "Stay away from my kids." He laughed, a sound that curled like smoke. "They're not yours, and you'll lose everything for thinking they are." The line went dead, leaving Marissa staring at the phone, her breath shallow. She glanced at Leon and Talia, asleep on the couch, their faces soft in the lamplight. Her love for them was a fortress, but Vincent's threat was a crack in its walls. She sank into a chair, her hands trembling as she clutched a mug of tea gone cold. The neighborhood's whispers, the caseworker's doubts, Vincent's voice, they swirled like a storm, threatening to tear her family apart. Yet in the quiet, she heard Leon's stories, Talia's kindness, their trust in her. They called her Mama Riss, not because of blood or color, but because she'd chosen them. That choice, born in a rainy night's defiance, was her strength. But as she locked the door, checking the windows against the dark, Marissa knew Vincent's shadow was closing in. Her heart whispered a vow. She'd protect her children, no matter the cost, even if it meant facing a monster who'd stop at nothing to break her. The Atlanta dawn broke with a cruel softness, sunlight spilling through Marissa Caldwell's cracked kitchen window, painting the linoleum in hues of gold that mocked the dread coiling in her chest. 5 years had woven Leon and Talia into her soul, their laughter a tapestry that held her together. But Vincent Hargrove's venomous promise, "You'll lose everything," hung like a storm cloud, its shadow darkening every moment. Marissa stood at the stove, flipping pancakes for her children, her hands steady despite the tremor in her heart. She glanced at Leon, 17 now, his sharp eyes scanning a newspaper, and Talia, 15, braiding her hair with a quiet focus. Their trust in her, their love, was a fire that warmed her. Yet she felt its fragility, like glass under a hammer. The air shifted, heavy with an unspoken warning. Marissa's pulse quickened, a mother's instinct screaming danger. She checked the locks twice last night, her fingers lingering on the tin box where the notebook, Vincent's damning ledger of crimes, lay hidden. She'd planned to meet Mr. Harris, her lawyer friend, today, to hand over the evidence that could topple Vincent's empire. But the world felt too still, like the hush before a predator strikes. "Mama Riss," Talia said, her voice a soft melody. You okay? You look worried. Marissa forced a smile, her heart aching at the concern in those green eyes. Just burning pancakes, baby, she lied, her voice a fragile shield. Before she could say more, the front door splintered under a battering ram's force, the sound a gunshot through her soul. Cops flooded the room, badges glinting like knives, their shouts slicing the morning's peace. Marissa Caldwell, you're under arrest for fraud and kidnapping, a burly officer barked, his eyes cold with judgment. Marissa's knees buckled, her breath stolen as if the air itself had betrayed her. Leon leapt to his feet, newspaper crumpling, his voice raw with fury. She didn't do anything! You're wrong! Talia's scream pierced the chaos, her hands reaching for Marissa. Don't take her! She's our mom! Marissa's heart shattered, each shard cutting deeper as the officer's grip tightened on her arm. She saw the world through a haze of tears, her children's faces etched with panic. Leon's fists clenched, ready to fight. Talia's eyes wide with terror, her braid unraveling. The neighbor's whispers echoed in her mind. A black woman with white kids? She's asking for trouble. Now those whispers had become chains. Don't hurt them, Marissa pleaded, her voice breaking like porcelain. The officer sneered, his words dripping with bias. You should have thought twice before playing hero, lady. Her blood boiled, but fear for her children drowned her rage. As handcuffs snapped around her wrists, cold and unyielding, Marissa's mind raced. Vincent had struck. His web of lies spun through corrupt officials, pinning crimes she'd never dreamed of, money she'd never touched, children she'd only loved. She caught Leon's gaze, his eyes blazing with a boy's desperate courage. Leon, Talia, she said, her voice a lifeline through the storm. Get the box. Find Mr. Harris. He'll help you. She fumbled in her apron, pressing a folded letter into Leon's trembling hand. You're strong, both of you. You live, you hear me? You live! Talia's sob tore through Marissa's heart, a sound rawer than any wound. Mama Riss, don't go, she cried, lunging forward, only to be held back by another officer. Leon grabbed her, his voice cracking. We'll get you out, Mama, we swear it. Marissa's tears fell, hot and silent, as she memorized their faces. Leon's fierce determination, Talia's fragile strength. She wanted to hold them, to shield them from this nightmare. But the cuffs pulled her away, each step a blade in her chest. The officers dragged her through the door, past neighbors gathered like vultures, their whispers sharp. Told you she was trouble. Marissa's head held high, her dignity a defiance against their judgment. She glimpsed a figure in the crowd, Vincent Hargrove, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the morning's chaos, his smile a predator's triumph. You should have taken the money, he mouthed, his pale eyes glinting with malice. Marissa's heart burned, not with fear, but with a mother's fury. She'd chosen love over his bribe, and now she'd pay the price. As the police van's door slammed shut, Marissa sank into the darkness. The engines rumbled, drowning out Talia's fading cries. Her hands, bound and cold, clutched the memory of her children's warmth. She saw Leon's ink-stained fingers, Talia's unraveling braid, their promise echoing in her soul. We'll get you out. The cell awaited, a cage for a woman whose only crime was loving too fiercely. But in her heart, a fire burned. Leon and Talia were her strength, her reason to endure. Vincent thought he'd won, but Marissa knew her children's love was a force he couldn't break. She closed her eyes, whispering to the void, My babies, you'll find a way. The Atlanta skyline glittered like a taunt, its lights mocking the darkness that had haunted Leon Carver's heart since the day Marissa was torn from them. He sat in a dimly lit diner, the clink of coffee mugs and hum of late-night chatter, a fragile shield against the ache that never left. His hands, now steady from years of crafting stories that exposed the city's underbelly, gripped a worn photograph. Marissa, Leon, and Talia on their old porch, her smile a beacon that had guided him through a life on the run. The letters she'd pressed into his hand that terrible morning burned in his memory, her words a vow. Live. Be strong. Now with Marissa facing a life sentence for a murder she didn't commit. Leon's chest tightened, guilt and fury warring within like a storm. Across the booth, Talia Warwick slid in, her presence a jolt to his soul. She was no longer the trembling girl clutching his arm, but a woman with eyes fierce as fire, her work saving Atlanta's lost children, a testament to Marissa's love. Yet her face carried the same pain Leon felt, a wound reopened by the news of Marissa's new trial. "Leon," she said, her voice a blade cutting through the diner's hum. "We swore we'd get her out. We can't fail her now." His throat burned, memories of Marissa's tear-streaked face flooding back. "I know, Talia," he rasped, his voice raw with years of suppressed grief. "But this setup, it's bigger than Vincent ever was." Talia's fingers traced the edge of the table, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. She'd built a life pulling kids from the streets, each one a mirror of the girl she'd been, saved by Marissa's open door. But the courtroom's verdict, guilty of murder, pinned on lies, felt like a betrayal of that love. "They're saying she killed Vincent's associate," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "Fingerprints, money, witnesses, all fake. Someone wants her gone forever." Leon's eyes darkened, his journalist's mind piecing together fragments. "Vincent's dead," he said, his voice low. "But his poison's still spreading. I dug into the case. Someone's pulling strings, someone with power." Their waitress, an older black woman with kind eyes, paused by their table. "You two look like you're carrying the world," she said, her voice soft but probing. "This about that Caldwell woman? Poor thing, a black lady like her never stood a chance in that courtroom." Talia's heart clenched, the sting of racial injustice slicing deep. "She's our mother," Talia snapped, her voice fierce. "She saved us when no one else would." The waitress's eyes widened, then softened. "Then you'd best fight for her, child. Atlanta's courts don't care for folks like her. Or you." The words landed like a fist, echoing the whispers they'd faced as Marissa's white foster kids. Leon pulled out a USB drive, its weight heavy with secrets. "I had the notebook digitized," he said, his voice a mix of determination and fear. "It's got everything. Vincent's deals, payoffs, names. But there's a new player. Naomi Ellison, a lawyer who worked for Vincent. She's been moving money, twisting evidence, keeping his empire alive." Talia's breath hitched, her mind racing to the woman who'd stood in court, her smile cold as ice. "Naomi's framing Mama Riss," she said, her voice a growl. "She's finishing what Vincent started." Leon nodded, his heart pounding like a war drum. "She's running a deal tonight, out at a warehouse in the suburbs. If we can get proof, we can break her." Talia's eyes blazed, her love for Marissa a fire that burned through doubt. "We go to that warehouse," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing her insides. "We get the truth for Mama Riss." Leon's jaw tightened, memories of their promise, "We'll get you out," flooding his mind. He'd spent years chasing truth, but this was personal, a debt to the woman who'd given him a home. "It's dangerous," he warned, his voice thick with worry. "Naomi's got people, cops, judges." Talia leaned forward, her voice a vow. "I'd walk through fire for her." "Leon, wouldn't you?" The diner's hum faded, the world narrowing to their shared resolve. Leon's heart ached, not just for Marissa, but for the boy he'd been, punching a wall as she was dragged away. Talia's hand found his, her touch a reminder of the sister who'd never stopped fighting. "We're her family," she said, her voice breaking but fierce. "We don't give up." Leon nodded, his eyes burning with unshed tears. "Then we do this together," he said, his voice a steel thread. "For Mama Riss." As they stood, the USB drive in Leon's pocket felt like a grenade, its secrets their only weapon. The waitress watched them go, her voice soft. "Godspeed, kids. Your mama's counting on you." Outside, Atlanta's night pressed close, its shadows hiding Naomi's web. Leon and Talia stepped into the dark, their hearts bound by a promise forged in love, their fear drowned by the fire of their purpose. Marissa's face, her smile, her tears, guided them, a beacon they'd follow to the end. The Atlanta night clung to the warehouse like a shroud, its rusted walls groaning under the weight of secrets. Leon Carver's heart pounded like a trapped bird, each beat echoing the promise he'd made to Mama Riss. "We'll get you out." He crouched behind a stack of crates, the air thick with dust and danger. His eyes locked on Talia as she moved silently beside him. Her face, lit by the faint glow of a flickering bulb, burned with a fire that mirrored his own. A sister's love, fierce and unyielding, for the woman who'd saved them. The USB drive in Leon's pocket felt like a live coal, its truth their only weapon against Naomi Ellison's empire of lies. But the weight of Kayla, the 12-year-old girl trapped in Naomi's grip, pressed heavier, her whispered dream, "I want to be a doctor," haunting Talia's every step. Naomi stood in the warehouse's heart, her tailored suit a stark contrast to the grime, her voice cutting like a blade through the silence. "You thought you could outsmart me?" she sneered, her pale eyes glinting as she gripped Kayla's arm. The girl's face, pale and streaked with tears, held a quiet courage that tore at Leon's soul, reminding him of Talia's trembling hands years ago. "Hand over the drive, or this child pays for your mother's sins." Talia's breath hitched, her heart a storm of rage and fear. She saw herself in Kayla, a girl discarded by the world, and Mama Rissa's voice echoed in her mind. "Love doesn't see color, only need." "Let her go, Naomi," Talia said, stepping forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "This isn't about her." Naomi's laugh was a venomous hiss, her grip tightening on Kayla. "You think this is just about Marissa?" she spat. "She humiliated Vincent, broke his empire, and I paid the price. Cast out, betrayed by a system I trusted." Her voice cracked, revealing a wound beneath her cruelty. A woman who'd once fought for justice like Marissa, but chose power over principle. Leon's chest tightened, his journalist's instincts catching the flicker of pain in her eyes, but his heart burned for Kayla, for Mama Riss, for the family they'd built against all odds. "You're not Vincent," he said, his voice low, cutting. "You're worse. You use kids to settle scores." Jasper Kendrick, Naomi's enforcer, stood nearby, his broad shoulders tense, his eyes darting with unease. Once a troubled youth saved by Marissa's kindness, he now served a woman who'd twisted his loyalty. Talia caught his gaze, her heart pounding with a desperate hope. "Jasper," she said, her voice soft but piercing, "you remember Mama Riss. She gave you a chance when no one else did. Don't let Kayla pay for Naomi's hate." Jasper's jaw clenched, his fingers twitching on his gun. Memories of Marissa's warm kitchen flooding back. A plate of biscuits, a hand on his shoulder, a voice saying, "You're more than your mistakes." His heart wavered, torn between duty and the truth he'd buried. Naomi's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift. "Don't listen to her, Jasper," she snapped, her voice a whip. "They're liars, just like Marissa." But Kayla's small voice broke through, trembling but clear. "I just want to help people, like the lady who saved them." Her words, raw with hope, struck Jasper like a blade, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Leon seized the moment, his voice urgent. "Jasper, you know what's right. Help us save her." The warehouse seemed to hold its breath, the air crackling with tension. Then a metallic groan shattered the silence. The warehouse's steel door began to close, its automated lock triggered, a trap Naomi had set to seal their fate. "3 minutes," she taunted, "or you're all buried here." Talia's heart raced, her mind flashing to Marissa's courage, her lessons of love over fear. She stepped closer to Jasper, her voice a plea. "You're not Naomi's pawn. You're the boy Mama Riss believed in." Jasper's resolve cracked, his gun lowering. "I've got a recording," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Naomi's deals, her lies. It's on my phone." He fumbled, pulling a device from his pocket, but his eyes darted to the closing door. "The code's partial. You need the rest from her man, Reese." Talia lunged toward Reese, Naomi's other guard, her voice fierce. "Give us the code, or you're trapped too." Reese hesitated, his loyalty wavering under the threat of the door's relentless descent. 729, he muttered, fear overtaking greed. Leon sprinted to the control panel, punching in the code, his hands shaking as the door shuddered to a stop. Talia grabbed Kayla, pulling her free, her heart swelling with relief and love. Leon activated a hidden camera, its lens capturing Naomi's snarl, Jasper's betrayal, the truth laid bare. Naomi's face twisted with fury, her voice a scream. "You'll pay for this!" But Jasper stepped between her and the siblings, his voice steady. "No, you will! For Mama Riss!" Leon's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the fire of their shared promise. They'd saved Kayla, but Marissa was still caged. As they fled the warehouse, the weight of their love for her burned brighter than ever. The Atlanta courtroom buzzed with a restless hum, but Marissa Caldwell's heart was a silent storm, its waves crashing against the bars of her holding cell. The cold steel cuffs on her wrists felt like anchors, pulling her deeper into a sea of despair where hope flickered like a dying ember. She'd lost count of the nights spent tracing Leon and Talia's faces in her mind. Their voices. "We'll get you out, Mama Riss." A fragile thread keeping her alive. The weight of the false charges, murder and fraud woven from lies, pressed against her chest. Each breath a defiance against a world that saw her skin before her soul. Yet deep within, a fire burned, fueled by the love she'd poured into two children who'd called her mother despite the whispers of a city that judged their bond. The cell door clanged open, and Marissa's pulse quickened, a spark of fear and longing igniting. Lila Thornton, her public defender, stepped in, her eyes alight with a fervor Marissa hadn't seen before. "They did it, Marissa," Lila said, her voice trembling with triumph. "Leon and Talia, they've got proof. You're going home." Marissa's breath caught, her heart lurching as if the earth had shifted. "My babies," she whispered, her voice breaking like thin ice. Lila nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "They're in court now, with evidence that blows this case apart. Naomi's lies are unraveling." Marissa's knees weakened, her hands clutching the bench to steady herself, tears hot and unbidden spilling down her cheeks. The courtroom doors swung open, and Marissa was led in, the weight of every eye, judge, jury, spectators, pressing like a storm. She saw them then. Leon, tall and fierce, his journalist's eyes blazing with purpose. Talia, her strength a quiet flame, her hands clasped tight as if holding back a flood. Beside them stood Kayla, the 12-year-old girl they'd saved, her face soft but resolute, and Jasper Kendrick, his broad shoulders slumped with remorse yet lifted by redemption. Marissa's heart swelled, a tide of love and pride drowning the pain of years lost. "Mama Riss," Talia choked, her voice a sob, and Leon's eyes glistened, his jaw tight with unspoken grief. The judge's gavel fell, a sound like salvation. Based on new evidence, a recording exposing Naomi Ellison's corruption and a ledger of her crimes, all charges against Marissa Caldwell are dismissed, he declared, his voice steady but awed. The courtroom erupted, gasps and murmurs swirling, but Marissa heard only her children's breaths, felt only their love. The cuffs fell away, and she stumbled forward, her arms opening as Leon and Talia rushed to her. Their embrace was a fortress, their tears a river that washed away the years of separation. "You kept your promise," Marissa whispered, her voice raw, her hands cupping their faces, memorizing every line. "You came back for me." Kayla stepped forward, her small hands slipping into Marissa's, her eyes bright with hope. "I told them I want to be a doctor, like you taught them to help people," she said, her voice trembling but sure. Marissa's heart ached, seeing Talia's younger self in Kayla's courage, a mirror of the girl she'd saved. "You'll be a great one, baby," Marissa said, her smile a beacon through her tears. Jasper hung back, his eyes downcast, shame and gratitude warring within. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice thick. "You helped me once, and I failed you." Marissa reached for him, her touch gentle but firm. "You chose right today, Jasper. That's what matters." A court officer, his face etched with skepticism, muttered to another, "A black woman with white kids walking free? That's a story nobody'll believe." Marissa's spine stiffened, her heart pounding with a mother's defiance. "Love makes the unbelievable real," she said, her voice carrying across the room, silencing the whispers. Leon's hand tightened on hers, his voice low but fierce. "They'll believe it now, Mama. We made sure of it." Talia nodded, her eyes blazing. "We're family, no matter what they think." As they walked out into Atlanta's sunlight, Marissa felt the warmth on her face, a sensation she'd thought lost forever. The city's hum surrounded them, but her world was these faces. Leon's determined gaze, Talia's fierce love, Kayla's budding hope, Jasper's quiet redemption. The years in a cage hadn't broken her. They'd forged her love into something unbreakable. Yet a shadow lingered in her heart, a whisper of Naomi's lingering influence, her empire not fully dismantled. Marissa pushed it aside, focusing on the hands in hers, the family she'd chosen. "We're home," she said, her voice a vow, her heart a flame that no lie could extinguish. The Atlanta evening wrapped Marissa Caldwell's small home in a gentle hush, the kind of quiet that felt like a sigh after a long battle. A year had passed since the courtroom's gavel set her free, but the warmth of that freedom still glowed in her chest, a fire kindled by the love of her chosen family. The kitchen, once cramped and threadbare, now brimmed with life, plates clattering, laughter rising like a melody over the sizzle of frying chicken. Marissa stood at the stove, her hands steady with purpose, her heart full as she watched Leon, Talia, Jasper, and Kayla around the table. Their faces, lit by the soft glow of a new chandelier, were a tapestry of scars and hope, each one a testament to the love that had stitched their broken pieces together. Leon, his journalist's eyes softer now, leaned back, a rare smile breaking through the weight he'd carried for years. His heart, once a storm of guilt for leaving Marissa behind, now pulsed with pride. He'd spent his life chasing truth, but here, in this kitchen, he found it. In Mama Rissa's laughter, in Talia's fierce spirit. "Mama," he said, his voice warm, "you're gonna burn that chicken if you keep staring at us." Marissa chuckled, her laugh a balm to his soul. "Can't help it, Leon," she said, her eyes glistening. "I'm still getting used to having you all here." Her heart ached with a joy so sharp it hurt, the memory of cold cell walls fading against the warmth of their presence. Talia, her hands deftly setting the table, felt a swell of gratitude that threatened to spill over. She'd built a life program for Atlanta's lost children, each one a reflection of the girl Marissa had saved. But the weight of those years apart, the fear that she'd failed her mother, still lingered like a bruise. "Mama Riss," she said, her voice soft but steady, "you taught me to keep fighting, no matter what." Marissa turned, her eyes locking on Talia's, seeing the girl who'd once clung to her brother, now a woman whose heart burned for others. "You were always a fighter, baby," Marissa said, her voice thick with love. "You just needed someone to believe in you." Kayla, 12 and bright-eyed, sat scribbling in a notebook, her small frame radiating a quiet courage that pierced Marissa's heart. The girl's dream to be a doctor, born in the warehouse's terror, had taken root, nourished by Marissa's love. "Mama Riss," Kayla said, her voice trembling with excitement, "I'm writing a story about a lady who saves kids like you." Marissa's breath caught, tears pricking her eyes as she saw herself in Kayla's words. A hero, not a convict. "You keep writing, baby," she said, her hand resting on Kayla's shoulder. "You're gonna save people one day, with your heart and your hands." Jasper Kendrick, once Naomi's enforcer, sat at the table's edge, his broad hands fidgeting, his heart a tangle of shame and redemption. Marissa's forgiveness had been a lifeline, pulling him from the darkness of his choices. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, his voice low, "I don't deserve to be here, after what I did." Marissa turned, her eyes gentle but firm, seeing the boy she'd once helped, now a man seeking absolution. "Jasper," she said, her voice a warm embrace, "you chose to help us. That's what makes you family." His eyes glistened, a weightlifter, his heart finding a home in her words. The doorbell chimed, and Talia opened it to find a letter, its sender a mystery. She read aloud, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Caldwell, you helped me when I was a kid on the streets. Now I'm giving back. Your organization's getting a grant to keep saving kids." Marissa's heart leapt, a tide of joy washing over her. The letter from a soul she'd touched long ago was proof her love had rippled beyond these walls. "See that?" she said, her voice breaking with pride. "Every heart you touch keeps beating for someone else." The room fell silent, save for the clink of plates and Kayla's soft humming. A neighbor's voice drifted through the window, tinged with old judgment. "A black woman with all those white folks? Still strange. Marissa's smile didn't falter, her heart steady as she looked at her family. Let them talk, she said, her voice a quiet thunder. Love builds what hate can't break. Leon raised a glass of sweet tea, his eyes shining. To Mama Riss, he said, who showed us families what you choose. Talia's voice joined, fierce and clear. To love that never gives up. As they ate, laughter filling the air, Marissa felt a completeness that no cell could steal. Her family, Leon, Talia, Kayla, Jasper, was a mosaic of broken pieces, each one shining because she dared to love them. The world outside might judge, but here in this kitchen, love was the law. Her heart, once battered, now sang, a melody of redemption that echoed beyond the stars. Marissa Caldwell's story, woven from sacrifice and unbreakable love, lingers like a heartbeat in the quiet of Atlanta's night. Her chosen family, Leon, Talia, Kayla, Jasper, proved that love can shatter chains, defy judgment, and heal the deepest wounds. What does their journey stir in you? How does Marissa's courage, a Black woman fostering white children against a world's whispers, inspire your own choices? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters, just as theirs did. Thank you for walking this path with us, for letting their story touch your heart. Marissa's legacy reminds us, every act of love ripples beyond what we can see. Stay with us for more stories that challenge, uplift, and prove that family is what we choose, not what we're given. Until we meet again, keep believing in the power of love.